Oh, thank you. I want to thank you very much for coming this evening in the rain. I want to thank David Marini, who is our Master of Ceremonies and also who designed our flyer and also obtained our liquor license, because I was just going to sneak but that's not the way to do things. Yeah, and arranged for the fabulous trap, and yeah, has done so much. Also Heather Watson, who ferried in all the food and was such a support. I also want to thank John Lasky, who's standing at the back, who hired me at the school. And I want to also thank Flynn Helfand, who's here, who was part of Summer Brevity and really added so much to it. The school announced at a meeting that this was the year of pedagogy, and at first I was going around, making fun of it. And then I looked up to see what pedagogy meant. And then I got more in the spirit of it. So I used to go to lots of readings, but the real reason that I went to readings wasn't because I wanted to be read to, it was because I wanted to write, but I didn't really know how to get started. So at readings, then it tended to be that, the person would read, and then later there'd be questions and answers. And one person, but never me, because I knew better, would get up and say, "I want to write. What should I do?" And the person up here would say, "Write," and everyone would and, being told to write if you don't really know how to start is not helpful. Getting laughed at, that's not helpful. So I didn't ask the question, but I wanted to ask the question. So as part of the year of pedagogy, then I thought I would show an action that I enjoy that is helpful, I think, for writers, and especially if you're visual artists and you're thinking, well, I would like to write about my work. And what it is to take like note cards and just write the main thing, the thing that someone said to you, the thing that the thing means to you, and just write the thing, that brief thing on the note card. And then later, look at the note cards and tell yourself the story associated with what's on the note. The context, you hear about that a lot over in Hooper. The context, contextualize it for yourself. Yeah, and then after you tell yourself that a couple of times, then write down what you've said. And there's your first thing. So I had the same best friend for 35 years, Robert Castleberry. And he died in 2004 unexpectedly of a coronary incident. And so periodically I make memorials, but they're internal spaces, which is, as artists, and pretty much most work starts there. So you have that space already. So then what I've done is periodically then I make lists of things just to remind me of incidents that mean things to me, and then I'll tell myself those stories, and that's a great consolation. So I thought I would show you how I do this, so that maybe on your own, on your either about your work or about your own life, you can do cards and start something. So the first one is Reveille, Reveille. So Robert Castleberry and I in the 1970s went to Florida, and we rented a sailboat. Neither one of us really knew how to sail. And we'd heard of tacking, but what is tacking? And it turned out there was a disagreement between us on tacking. So the boat was like this, and we could see in the clear water jellyfish, tons of them. And we were fighting loudly on what we should do to right ours. And also, the shore was clearly moving further and further away. And I think Cuba is the direction we're tacking towards. So we had this huge fight, and someone was swimming by, I don't know how they weren't bothered by those jellyfish, and said, do you all need help? Do you want me to take the boat in for you? So we did, we swam through the jellyfish and made it to shore, furious with each other, and we drove back towards New Orleans in absolute silence and just fury with the car. And we went by a sign after about 30 minutes of uncomfortable silence, and there was a frog, and Robert, and it had two words written next to it, and because of being so used to French in Louisiana, and Robert said, "Reveille, reveille, what does that mean?" And I said, "Robert, that's a frog. I think it's rivet, rivet." Well, that because of the discomfort in the car was just hilarious. So we just laughed and laughed, and you know how things with your friend where it's been so wrong and then all of a sudden it's right. Reve did it. When you're close to someone and often we think, things have to be perfect, things have to be, major, but it turns out, a lot of little things turn out to be the things that mean the most to you. So once I was walking with Robert Castleberry, because we were living, then in small places in the South, so going to the filling station to get a pop, was like something to look forward to. So, I said, well, what are you going to get? And he said, well, I'm going to get French vanilla ice cream. I said, French vanilla? What's the difference between French vanilla and vanilla? And he said, it's eggier. This one is the Shakespeare Virgin's One Regret. So Robert was working as a busboy at K-Paul restaurant in New Orleans, run by Chef Paul Prudhomme, and they got a gig in San Francisco, to, like a visiting restaurant where they would set up the K-Paul's in San Francisco, and they would run it for like 6 weeks, and then they would all go back to New Orleans. So Robert was here, and he signed up for a Shakespeare class at UC Berkeley during the day because he only bussed at night at the restaurant in San Francisco, so he would ride over to Berkeley to the Shakespeare Company and work on plays. And one of the things they would, was revealing things about yourself, like drama things. And they said, well, Robert, what's your regret? He said, well, my regret is that I've never had a lover. Well, they took that to mean that Robert was a virgin. Well, of course, Robert had by then had several thousand sexual partners. When by the time he was 14, he was, doing the rounds at the bus station in Tulsa. So then he was too embarrassed to tell them that he wasn't a virgin. Let's see, this one is vomiting Pepto-Bismol. So Robert Castleberry and I were in a bathroom once because he had an ulcer, and we were tripping, and he vomited. We thought his ulcer was hemorrhaging because it was red, and we were working with the drug, and we just need to be very calm. You all shouldn't do drugs; they're wrong. But this was like the 1970s, and that was a very different era. So we just take you to the, because you're hemorrhaging. But then you go, I'm feeling sick earlier. I took Pepto-Bismol, and that's all that was. Enjoy the movie Mr. Castleberry. So Mr. Castleberry was teaching in high school in New Orleans, and there was a pornographic movie theater on Canal Street, and we had a disagreement, Mr. Castleberry and I, on whether they could show in Louisiana hardcore pornographic movies, because I thought they could, and he said they couldn't. So we bet $5, and we went to see Little Girls Blue, and you could tell when during the credits of the opening that I had won. Well, before we went in, I said, "Oh, do you want a Coke and popcorn?" And he was a good eater like me, so we both went in with Cokes and popcorn. So then the next day, the morning at high school, then he taught English, and he went into English class, and one of his students said, "Enjoy the movie, Mr. Castleberry." It turned out it was one of his high school students worked in the concession stand and had sold the Cokes and the popcorn. Let's see. This one is the Suitcase Corner offshore. This was Robert Castleberry was working because he couldn't live on this money from teaching the high school. Then he would go offshore in the summer. And when he first started, the first time they had a crane that would with a little box they would lift you over from the boat, put you over on the offshore platform. So Mr. Castleberry put his suitcases in the little box, and then he hunkered down in the box and pulled the net down, and they lifted him over, and then he got out, and then he noticed that the people that had done it before, the real men, they put their suitcases in the box, and they stood and held on the outside, like men. Let's see. This one is tearing up my note from 1976. In 1976, then Robert Castleberry and I were sharing an apartment, and I got a note that said, if you're going to have friends over at night and make noise, you should move. So I kept that note for until 2003 because it was so funny. And then later he said, well, you know, I wrote the note because I didn't have the nerve to tell you to your face. But then Robert Castleberry came to visit me in 2003, and he saw that note and he tore it up. So then I was sorry to have lost the note, you know. And then when he died, then I was. But then you think, oh yeah, but the act, and this seems like meaningful to us as visual artists or writing artists. It's really what it means, you know, because the act of tearing it up, the act of its being gone, is really an object in the same way that the note was. And then finally, Rita Coolidge's oysters. So this is the peril of fame. Robert Castleberry was working as a busboy at Marty's restaurant in New Orleans, and across the street was the Mahalia Jackson Theater, and Rita Coolidge was performing over there. So they called, her manager called in Marty's restaurant and said, do you have oysters on the half shell? And they said, yes, we do. But they really didn't. So they sent Robert, but he didn't know why, on a bicycle to go down to Bourbon Street, to go through the garbage at Galatoire's to look for unbroken oyster shells. And he brought them back, and they ran them through the dishwasher. And then they put them on trays of salt with bottled oyster, one in each one. And when Rita Coolidge came over, several dozen oysters on the half shell made their appearance. So you can see so get note cards of your own, write down things that mean something to you, tell yourself the story and write it down. And thank you, Ms. Marie.